Hello, I'm author Jason Lee Willis, and this is my personal reading of The Alchemist's Tomb. Dedicated to the cellar monster that lived at my childhood farm in South Dakota. You were persistent, but you never got me. As the fourth and final element in the Alchemist Chronicles, the Alchemist's Tomb will pick up where the Alchemist's map left off following the death of Joseph Nicolet. While William Drummond Stewart really was baptized in St. Louis with Joseph Nicolet as a sponsor, most of the details in this story are invention. And yes, Stewart really did bring Antoine Clement with him on a clandestine trip to the Holy Lands, but that doesn't prove the Philosopher's Stone is real either. Like my other novels in the Alchemist Chronicles, this story will be rooted in history with equal parts fantasy. Just like the other stories are inspired by Indiana Jones, the Da Vinci Code, and National Treasure romps through history, this story combines my love of Bram Stoker's Dracula and Frederick Manfred's Lord Grizzly. Yet my storytelling style requires that the fantasy elements could be possible. So that means I enjoy the real history as much as my creative twists. If you want to learn what's true and what's make-believe, check out my website for insight, www.williswrites.com. I'd like to thank Julie for first bringing me to Transylvania and the following year to the headwaters of the Columbia River near Sinclair Pass. Hopefully the reader will enjoy these trips as much as I did. Next, I want to thank Raven for her curiosity and insight during the developmental edit of the novel, and then Carol for helping tighten and polish the story. I'm indebted to this team. Part 1. A World Without Nicolet. Prologue. Washington, D.C., July 24th, 1843. Joseph Nicolet stopped abruptly and turned to face the sidewalk behind him. A few strangers looked directly at him, but not one adjusted their plans. No one pulled a knife. A gang of thugs did not rush from an alley. Despite his fears, danger did not present itself. Convinced, he slid his hand into his vest pocket, where he felt the key to his office. Safety was just a short distance away. On one side of the street, the offices of the U.S. Corps of Topographic Engineers loomed. Inside, many friends and colleagues toiled on maps of the frontier, but his time making maps was over, at least publicly. On the other side of the street, a red brick two-story building sat a few yards off the street. Aside from an address, the building's purpose remained undeclared to the public. Nicolet pivoted on his heels and continued to the front door. Once he pushed through the double doors, a young clerk looked up from the front desk of the lobby, but recognizing Nicolet's familiar face, he smiled and nodded and went about his business. The building housed a governmental pension distribution center, but a friend of a friend had allocated storage space to Nicolet for his project. Even though the walk from his apartment had not been exerting, Nicolet perspired and his hands shook. After being stuck in Washington for 3 years, Nicolet feared the coming expedition would be stopped, which is why he kept it a secret. He trotted down the stairs to the basement, looked back over his shoulder, and unlocked the solid door. At the center of the large room, 8 tables had been gathered to create a large island, leaving him with just enough space to circle the entirety of North America. For he'd assembled a collection of maps to bring the continent to life in front of his eyes. He lit the closest lantern to confirm nothing was amiss. The central map remained immaculately clean. The smaller tables along the walls contained his personal collections of artifacts and notes from his previous expedition. The contents of the outside tables were diverse, ranging from books to scientific equipment to geological samples. He walked over to the other side of the room, lit another lamp, and studied his risky plan already set into motion. A dozen hand-carved figurines stood upon the map. Nicollet knew as many artists as he did scientists, so finding a sculptor to make the figurines had been easy. When he returned from the frontier in 1840, he commissioned the figurines and enacted his plan. His own figurine stood alone above Washington, D.C., where it had been for far too long. On the other side of the map, he adjusted the locations of his friends from recent correspondence. In the Rocky Mountains, his apprentice, John C. Fremont, captured the attention of a nation as he explored the untamed West. My red herring. Far to the north, near the disputed Canadian border, William Drummond Stewart's figurine, along with Antoine Clement's, searched for the headwaters of the Missouri River. Just south, also in Montana, Jesuit priest Pierre-Jean de Smet served at a mission for the Salish Indians. They draw the eyes of my enemies while I am stuck here. Nicollet walked to the north side of the table, inspecting the territory known as Minnesota. His official government map, still in the process of publication, drew attention to the southern part of the state, where he boldly labeled it the Undine region. Pawns, like David Faribault and Jim Tyope, would soon be on the move, leaving no one to draw attention to the northern part of the state, where Lake Manitou waited for his return. 2 more months, and my plan goes into action. A sharp knock on the door caused Nicollet to jump out of his skin. The pension office workers rarely interacted with him, so his heart raced as his eyes searched for a weapon. A second knock drew him away from thoughts of defense, and reluctantly, he approached the door. He placed his foot a short span from the door to serve as a doorstop, reached for the handle, and opened it an inch or two. A handsome young man with a fop of hair swept across his head stood smiling in the dark doorway. Professor Nicollet? The friendliest face on the 1836 expedition had been the one who tried to murder him. Nicollet defensively kept his foot against the door to say, "I'm busy." The young man held a wrapped package with a red ribbon and bow. "Do I know you?" Nicollet asked. "No, I haven't had the honor, sir. I'm Julien Glissant, an assistant to Auguste Edouard. I've been in town for the past few days trying to deliver this to you, but..." "Ah, the Philadelphia silhouette artist. I'd completely forgotten." Nicollet felt the hairs on his neck relax. Yes, come in." Nicollet opened the door widely, but not in naivety, but so that anything that happened could hopefully be heard by the clerk at the top of the stairs. Glissant looked around the room, puzzled. "Is there a place I can set it?" "Set it on Florida," Nicollet said Set it on Florida. Nicollet pointed to the corner of the map. I was given instruction to ensure the art has not received blemish," Glissant said as he began to unwrap the package. It's been a challenge locating you, sir. I've been to 4 addresses associated with your name." "Ah, yes. Wealth has not aligned with fame, unfortunately, but my friends often offer their hospitality. How is it you found me here?" Glissant swallowed hard and did not provide an answer. A terrifying sign. The young man continued to unwrap the package. "A fellow by the name of Jean-Louis. You'll have to excuse me. I didn't pay close attention." I was followed here, Nicollet realized. Am I in danger? With a flourish, Glissant slid out an actual portrait instead of a hidden weapon. Relieved, Nicollet stepped closer to study the 2 dark figures silhouetted against a tan canvas. In the portrait, Nicollet stood facing Henry Darwin Rogers, the geologist he'd met months earlier back in Philadelphia. "Do you like it, sir?" Glissant asked at his shoulder. Yes. I look thin and healthy. Auguste could have added a few more inches to my height, but what I don't understand is why it has been delivered to me here." Edouard wanted to make sure you were pleased with it." As requested, Edward drew him holding a map of the lost island continent of Atlantis. Yes, but this was supposed to be sent to a friend of mine, John C. Fremont. It was meant to be a gift to him, in case I died trying to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone from Lake Manitou. Nicolette felt a chill run down his spine. The plan had been discovered. Glissant showed far too much interest to be an actual assistant, and his forced smile slowly crept away. He's here to kill me. Nicolette felt his knees weaken and sat at one of the chairs along the edge of the massive map. His time on the frontier had taught him he had no predatory or self-defense skills. He took his eyes off the young assassin, choosing to focus instead on the portrait. The convention in Philadelphia had been an excuse to privately meet with Henry Rogers, an expert on thermal springs and geology. Rogers blindly offered his insight into Nicolette's unique collection of vitriol samples and his theories on how geological catastrophes and upheavals had formed the coal fields of the Appalachian Mountains chain. That had been their first guarded conversation. But after Nicolette invited him for drinks at the hotel bar, the two men had unguarded conversation about the Great Flood of Genesis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and a discussion about the lost continent of Atlantis. For his part, Rogers enthusiastically vetted Nicolette's numerous theories about human civilizations, empires, and kingdoms existing prior to recorded history. On a whim, Nicolette and Rogers posed the following day for silhouette artist Auguste Edouart, who captured the likeness of the celebrity scientist. After, Nicolette commissioned Edouart to include him, holding a map of Atlantis in his hands, a clue left for his wayward apprentice. Before Fremont and his friends scattered to the wind, Nicolette posed a theory to them about the legendary Philosopher's Stone, including who made it, when it was made, and why its location mattered. Now, with his back turned to the assassin, Nicolette gazed upon the island civilization. But at a later time, there occurred portentous earthquakes and floods, and in one grievous day the island of Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea and vanished. Am I about to sink into the sea also? Noting the silence, Nicolette turned to face the young assassin. Glissant's lips tightened, and his cheek constricted in an attempt to hide a smile. I'm just a messenger. And what is your message? Nicolette watched for a knife or a pistol to be drawn, but Glissant held steady. My master wanted to make sure the address was correct. He believes you might have made a mistake in the shipping. Am I a paranoid fool? Is this young man truly a servant? Cherry Grove, Kentucky, Nicolette said emphatically. It's the Benton estate, the childhood home of Jesse Fremont. I'm glad I came. It turns out you did make a mistake in the shipping address. I did? Shouldn't this work of art be sent to Scotland instead? Nicolette stifled his gasp and swallowed hard. His eyes betrayed him for a moment as they glanced up past the drawing of Atlantis to the far-off figurine of William Drummond Stewart at the headwaters of the Missouri River. Who are you? As I said, I'm only a messenger sent to confirm who sent you. I don't mean to alarm you, Professor Nicolette. I'm only a friend of a friend who wants to ensure that your efforts do not go to waste. It would be a shame if a misstep was made at the end of your journey. Glissant looked over the grand map as he understood everything about it and the coming expedition. A friend of a friend. Nicolette thought back to over a decade ago when the chaos of the riots became the July Revolution. A friend had stepped out of the shadows to save his life from a secret society that wanted him killed for his knowledge. The same friend then set him on the quest for a lost treasure. Are you saying that Fremont is being watched? Glissant walked around to the other side of the table, stopping to look at the Minnesota Territory, the intended destination for Nicolet's covert expedition. Your life has been in constant danger for several years now, yet by all accounts, you've succeeded beyond our wildest hopes. Nicolet sighed in great relief. I thought you'd come to kill me. Are you here to stop me? Glissant shook his head. Only the Creator can determine the best path, and you must follow his will. But, Glissant glanced to the west, to Drummond in the north, and Fremont in the south. Even the mighty civilization of Atlantis fell into the sea, a symbol that even the greatest will one day end. As much as we'd like for you to go to Rome and personally share your discoveries, our sources know what you are planning next. Should we send the portrait to Council Bluffs? Nicolet asked, eyeing the figurine of Jesuit missionary Pierre-Jean de Smet. Obviously, de Smet told you about the plans for my next expedition. Surely he could be trusted. Years ago, when Nicolet was just a boy, his family risked everything to save a group of Jesuit priests from the mobs of the French Revolution. But it hadn't been the Society of Jesus who saved his life from the mob in the subsequent July Revolution. It had been a clandestine organization independent of the Catholic Church, the Periphery. The Jesuits do have a curiosity about the old legends, but we are concerned how they would behave if someone other than de Smet did in fact come into possession of your portrait. Is there something you need to tell me about my young apprentice? Captain Fremont is a loyal friend, but our enemies watch his every move. His popularity grows, and so does attention given to him. If he were to receive anything from you, it would be known, especially a portrait with such obvious value. The Periphery challenged him to find the physical location of the ancient map. My governmental map, it is set to be published with some fairly obvious value written upon it. The Undine region, Lesueur, Lahatan, Blue Earth. Let me speak plainly. The Order of Eos, the Priory of Ormus, the Jesuits, they've known about the Undine region for centuries now. So your map will only appear as an independent confirmation of their theories. And if you happen to return to the Undine region and determine that the Philosopher's Stone was not lost off the coast of Bermuda, but in fact remained hidden away in some secret cave, little would change. However, Glissant walked back around the table, stopping beside Nicolet to point his finger directly upon the island of Atlantis. Neither our enemies nor our allies have been able to sift through the centuries of tainted knowledge to correctly discern the purpose of the stone. Surely you don't believe this portrait reveals such secrets. We understood your reference. Those who search for the stone have their own theories about its purpose, and this portrait will only inflame their curiosity. It proves to us that you were the right man for the job when we plucked you from the riots in Paris. Your success in scouring the frontier has alarmed both your allies and enemies. By holding the map of Atlantis, you propose a theory to whoever looks upon it. And what does the Periphery believe I'm referencing with my portrait? Atlantis, Hyperborea, Thule. The tales all go back to the same legends, don't they? With a portrait of you holding such a map, you're suggesting to both enemy and ally that the quest is not just about finding the Philosopher's Stone, but also about finding the resting place of the man who made it. Nicolet nodded. I met a wise old man out on the prairie who vexed me with this very thought. What is the purpose of the stone? So when I found a haunted place out on the frontier where an ancient spirit slumbers, it made me realize it's not what they are searching for, but instead who they are searching for that truly matters. And you are determined to test your hypothesis, Professor Nicolet? To my dying breath. Young Fremont is noble, but he is too close to your enemies to continue the quest, Glissant said, studying the map. We do not know what de Smet and the Jesuits would do with such knowledge, and those in Minnesota do not have the resources to act, if your theory is correct. So we must insist that you send this portrait to Scotland. The periphery worries about me dying. You want Captain Billy to be Plan B if I die? Glissant rolled his eyes. We know about Stuart's baptism in St. Louis and the subsequent trip to the Middle East. We also realize you've used him as another red herring, sending him far up the Missouri to confuse your enemies. If Atlantis does fall and in a day sinks into the ocean, we'd like him to possess the portrait. Lord Stuart's dedication to you is known, and his independent wealth could make him a formidable asset in the days to come. Let him continue your work. Nicolette looked over his elaborate extraction plan to acquire the Philosopher's Stone and to discover the location of a lost tomb, and the audacity of it temporarily stoled his nerves. Yes. Send it to William. Glissant immediately began packing up the portrait while the forlorn Nicolette sat in a chair. The young man finished and nodded his head to Nicolette. May the grace of God fall upon your endeavors. As soon as the young man left, Nicolette felt a bit of optimism. Succeed or fail, the periphery would still be there. Stuart would continue the quest. But Nicolette didn't plan on failing. In just a few more weeks, he'd return to the frontier to test his ultimate theory.